They called it Protocol Theta 9, sterilize and abandon all non-essential assets in the event of planetary instability. Velcaron 5 had become unstable. The seismic readings spiked beyond safety limits. The order was clear: evacuate, and leave behind everything not deemed worth the risk. Zaraka, the Velcarian she-wolf, was categorized as non-essential. Among the Dominion species, this was standard procedure. Logical. Efficient. Ruthless. The Velcarian wolves, apex predators native to the planet, had once been considered dangerous but useful. Zaraka had been captured during an expedition and kept under observation for nearly 2 cycles. Dominion xenobiologists labeled her Specimen Alpha, a female adult measuring over 2 meters in length, with glistening black fur that shimmered with bioluminescent threads, a trait evolved for night camouflage. Her fangs were capable of crushing steel, her senses sharper than any known predator. But what startled the researchers wasn't her lethality, it was her behavior. Zaraka observed. She learned. She responded to tone, to body posture. She recognized personnel. She growled at those who showed aggression and remained passive with those who showed curiosity. It was the human among them, Dr. Aaron Voss, who noticed something beyond animal instinct. Aaron recorded that Zaraka mimicked blinking patterns when people stood before her. She adjusted her vocalizations based on who was in the room. She even, on one occasion, pushed back a data pad that had fallen into her enclosure. It wasn't random. It wasn't luck. It was intelligence. Then Zaraka mated. None of the scientists expected that outcome. She had not been exposed to any males since capture, but some speculated she had been pregnant upon arrival. The scans confirmed it, 3 embryos. The debate began immediately. Dominion consensus was swift: terminate. The cubs would be born under stress, with unpredictable mutations caused by atmospheric toxins and nutrient-controlled captivity. They were flawed. Zaraka herself had served her purpose. She had given data, behavioral patterns, biological samples. Her offspring were a liability, not an asset. Aaron argued quietly but firmly. She said the cubs presented a unique opportunity for understanding evolutionary adaptation and intelligence transfer. She said killing them would be premature and short-sighted. The Dominion board overruled her. The cubs were not to be incubated or monitored. Zaraka was to be left behind with them. The base's structural alarms blared 2 rotations later. The final tremor fractured 3 of the habitat supports and threatened a core collapse. Emergency evacuation commenced. Only mission-critical resources and personnel were permitted on the outbound craft. Zaraka, injured and now nursing her newborns, lay in the southern holding sector, Sector 12, already depowered. She had no heat, no nourishment, no light. And she would not be moved. As the Dominion staff filed into the shuttles, there were no arguments. No hesitation. Except one. Dr. Aaron Voss stood at the shuttle bay, looking back at the compound, her fingers trembling against the biometric pad. Her fellow researcher, a Cerethian named Kalner, noticed her hesitation. "It is irrational to hesitate," he said. "They are non-sapient creatures. Let the planet claim them." Aaron didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the steel-gray sky, the outline of the base disappearing behind a rising dust storm. She remembered the last time she had been in Sector 12. Zaraka had lain curled around her cubs, bleeding from a shoulder wound received during the quake. Her eyes had lifted slowly to meet Aaron's. There was no rage. There was no plea. Just a terrible, heavy silence, as if she knew what was coming. No one protested when Aaron stepped back from the loading ramp. No one stopped her as she activated a dropship and disengaged the lock manually. The AI control attempted to override her input. She bypassed it using her human-coded emergency authorization. A minor loophole. Humans were expected to behave unpredictably. It was noted in the Dominion databanks as a statistical inevitability. The shuttle broke from orbit just as the main craft left the atmosphere. Dominion logs recorded it as an unsanctioned anomaly. One sentence was entered into the mission debrief. "Subject Voss deviated. Human instinct overrides protocol. No recovery mission warranted. On the surface of Velcaron 5, as ash began to fall in sheets across the dying compound, the roar of an engine cut through the silence. A single light pierced the gloom. The bay doors to Sector 12 creaked open. And for the first time in 3 days, Zaraka raised her head. The scent was familiar. The voice, even more so. "Easy, girl," Erin whispered as she stepped through the debris, the emergency lamp casting long shadows behind her. "I came back." Zaraka did not growl. She did not move. One cub stirred beneath her. Erin knelt, hand outstretched. "I couldn't leave you." Erin had always been an anomaly in the Dominion's eyes. A biologist, yes, but more dangerously, a human one. She wasn't chosen for her scientific credentials alone. Those were easily matched by Dominion species with superior cognitive calibration. She was there because Earth had insisted on representation, and the Dominion, in its condescending grace, allowed it. A gesture. A compromise. But from the moment she arrived, they made their expectations clear: observe, record, comply. Nothing more. She had done just that. Until Zaraka. It began with glances. The way Zaraka tracked movement, not out of predatory instinct, but awareness. Erin noticed that she responded not just to noise, but to patterns, pauses, tone shifts. She wasn't reacting to stimulus. She was processing meaning. Dominion researchers dismissed it as reflex mimicry. Erin started her own logs in secret. Not just clinical notes, but impressions, reflections. Over time, those logs became more than scientific journals. They became conversations she wasn't allowed to have aloud. The more she watched Zaraka, the more she saw the lie in the Dominion's belief that empathy and morality were obsolete. To them, sapience was a sterile equation of problem-solving ability, memory capacity, and linguistic recursion. If a creature didn't fit those metrics, it didn't qualify. Erin saw something else: intention, recognition, care. When Zaraka nudged a cub gently beneath her body after it cried out, that wasn't instinct. That was protection. When she refused to eat until the cubs did, that was prioritization. It wasn't just that she cared. It was who she cared for. And she remembered. Zaraka never forgot Erin's scent, her voice, the way she moved. Even when the others rotated out, Zaraka would always turn her head when Erin entered. That recognition wasn't statistical noise. It was memory, linked with trust. The Dominion refused to see it. It wasn't that they couldn't, it was that they wouldn't. If Zaraka was intelligent, then abandoning her meant murder. The kind of moral weight the Dominion spent centuries discarding. When the evacuation order came, Erin argued for reclassification. She presented data, video footage, behavioral analysis, cortical scans. The Dominion Council reviewed her findings in under 3 minutes. Their reply: emotional extrapolation is not admissible. They had calculated the probability of Zaraka's survival post-abandonment at 0.04%. For them, that closed the case. Efficiency required sacrifice. And compassion, in their doctrine, was a dangerous inefficiency. On the shuttle, as Velcaron 5 receded behind cold glass, Erin played Zaraka's last recorded scan on her wristband. Minor internal bleeding. Elevated cortisol. The cubs were underweight but viable. They would die slowly, frightened and alone. Not because nature had failed them, but because logic had. She stared at her crewmates. Dominion xenopsychologists with decades of fieldwork. All detached. All silent. One of them, a Thalrixian with translucent skin and pulse blue eyes, spoke without looking at her. "You're mourning a failed experiment." Erin clenched her jaw. Not in anger, but in shame. Shame that they weren't wrong. By Dominion law, Zaraka was an object. A failed test. But her gut screamed otherwise. She had seen enough. Felt enough. And now that they were safely leaving, she realized what had truly been tested wasn't Zaraka's intelligence. It was hers. Her species. And they were failing. That moment, quiet and unresolved, shifted something irreversible inside her. Erin didn't ask permission. She didn't debate. She knew the consequences. She activated her override codes not because she thought she'd be praised, but because not acting felt like a betrayal worse than death. It wasn't courage. It was refusal. A refusal to let everything she knew about life, dignity, and conscience be swept away by policy. The return flight was short. No warnings, no interference. Just silence. The Dominion didn't care. They expected her to vanish, to die, or to learn her lesson. What they didn't expect was that a human, given the choice between survival and morality, would pick the one that hurt more. That choice, illogical and inefficient, was the fracture in their system. Dominion officers would later ask each other, why didn't she follow protocol? Why risk her life for an animal? Why waste resources? But they never asked the right question. Not what she did, but who she became. And that question, quiet as it was, began to echo. Not just in Dominion halls, but in the minds of species that had long forgotten how to feel. Because when logic is all that's left, sometimes the only path forward is a reckless act of human defiance. Erin didn't return for glory. She didn't come back to prove anything. She came back because no one else would. The landscape around the abandoned compound was a fractured wasteland of crumbling metal and scorched earth. The once thriving Valkyrian research facility lay in ruins, scattered with debris from the recent seismic upheavals. The air was thick with dust and a faint acrid smell from leaking coolant systems. Erin stepped cautiously through the rubble, her every sense alert. The dropship's emergency supplies were limited, and time was against her. Zaraka lay beneath a broken section of the outer enclosure, her breathing shallow but steady. The wound on her shoulder was deep, bone grazed beneath torn muscle. Yet her instinct to protect her cubs was unwavering. She curled around the 3 pups nestled in the corner, shielding them from the cold. The cubs' small cries echoed softly, fragile and raw. Erin knelt beside Zaraka and gently ran a med scanner over the mother's wound. The display confirmed what she had suspected: no immediate risk of infection, but tissue damage severe enough to require prolonged rest. She administered pain suppressants and applied improvised bandages using strips torn from her own uniform. The cubs, smaller than her palm, whimpered and shifted closer under Zaraka's body. Despite the obvious danger, Zaraka's gaze met Erin's with a quiet resolve that transcended species barriers. She didn't attack, didn't retreat. Instead, she pushed one cub forward, nudging it toward Erin's open hands. The gesture was a silent plea, a fragile trust extended across the chasm of language and biology. Erin lifted the cub carefully, feeling the rapid heartbeat against her palm. The warmth was faint, but the cub was alive. The smallest of the 3, it had the same bioluminescent fur patterns as its mother, a subtle glow that pulsed with its breath. Erin's heart tightened. This wasn't just survival. It was a chance for something greater. The base's instability worsened. Tremors shook the ground every few hours, each one stronger than the last. Erin rigged together solar-powered heat lamps salvaged from the wreckage, creating a small nest of warmth for the cubs. The temperature drops at night were brutal, and without external heat, the pups would not survive long. Using salvaged nutrients and filtered water from emergency stores, Erin fed the cubs small amounts, carefully observing their reactions. They huddled together, fragile but resilient. Zaraka watched silently, her amber eyes reflecting a mix of exhaustion and cautious hope. Nightfall brought new challenges. A sudden aftershock caused part of the remaining shelter to collapse. Erin barely managed to shield the cubs with her body as debris rained down. Zaraka, despite her injuries, dragged herself over the rubble and helped clear a path. Her movements were slow but purposeful, driven by maternal instinct and an unspoken bond with Erin. That night they rested side by side, 2 survivors bound by necessity and trust. Erin's breathing slowed as exhaustion claimed her, but she remained alert to every sound, every twitch of the cubs. Zaraka lay close, her warmth a comfort in the cold ruins. Between them, no words were exchanged. None were needed. In the days that followed, Erin and Zaraka worked in quiet synchrony. The cubs grew stronger, their instincts sharpening. One began to mimic Erin's soft humming, a low, rhythmic sound that seemed to soothe them all. Erin recorded the behavior meticulously, aware that this cross-species communication was unprecedented. Food remained scarce. Erin rationed carefully, supplementing with edible plants identified during her prior explorations. The terrain was hostile, with toxic spores and predatory creatures lurking nearby. Every excursion outside the shelter was a calculated risk. The most dangerous were the larger Velcaran predators, descendants of the planet's ancient ecosystem. These massive beasts dominated the food chain, their keen senses detecting even the faintest disturbances. Erin and Zaraka faced one such predator when it appeared at the edge of their camp, drawn by scent and movement. Despite her wounds, Zaraka stood between Erin and the threat, growling low and fierce. The predator's yellow eyes gleamed as it circled, testing defenses. Erin, hands trembling, fired a flare from her sidearm, momentarily blinding the creature. Zaraka seized the chance, lunging forward and engaging in a brutal fight. When the predator lay still, Erin exhaled deeply, relief flooding through her. This fight wasn't just for survival, it was a declaration. They had claimed this fragile existence together. Erin's video logs chronicled everything: the cub's development, the increasing trust between human and Velcarian, the harsh realities of their situation. She spoke candidly, no longer a detached scientist but a protector. "This is no longer research," she said quietly. "It's loyalty. Compassion. Something that cannot be quantified but changes everything." As the planet continued to tremble beneath them, Erin and Zaraka forged a fragile alliance. Against all odds, their bond became a beacon of hope in a system that had abandoned them. The line between species blurred, united by a single, unyielding will to survive. Erin knew that survival on Velcaron 5 would demand more than just tending wounds and sheltering from storms. The planet's instability was worsening, and each tremor threatened to collapse the fragile sanctuary she and Zaraka had carved out. Supplies were finite, and the ecosystem was unforgiving. To endure, they needed more than instinct. They needed strategy, adaptability, and above all, trust. The cubs were growing rapidly, their bioluminescent fur intensifying, their eyes sharpening with curiosity. They began to explore beyond the nest, testing limits, learning from their mother and Erin alike. Erin observed the subtle exchanges between them, the way Zaraka communicated with low growls and body language, and how the cubs responded with tentative whimpers and playful movements. It was a language neither species had fully understood before, yet it was clear and urgent. Each day, Erin pushed herself further, venturing beyond the compound remains to scavenge usable materials: solar cells, power converters, water filtration units. The surrounding landscape was hazardous, scattered with toxic spores and predatory fauna. But the alternative was stagnation, and the alternative was death. Every foray became a test of nerve and precision. On one such expedition, Erin encountered a native Velcaran predator pack, a shadowy group of 6 sleek, feral creatures with razor teeth and eyes that reflected primal hunger. They eyed her cautiously but with unmistakable interest. Erin froze, calculating the odds, her heart pounding. The pack didn't attack immediately. Instead, they seemed to assess her presence, their behavior either hostile nor friendly. Zaraka's warning growls echoed behind Erin, a reminder that even her wounds were a liability in moments like this. Erin raised a hand slowly, signaling peace. She spoke in low, measured tones, more to steady herself than the creatures. In that moment, she understood that the planet's predators were not mindless killers but sentient guardians of their territory. The encounter passed without violence, but the message was clear: Velcaran dominance was alive and vigilant. Back at the shelter, Erin devised a plan to fortify their position. Using scavenged materials, she fashioned barriers that could withstand moderate seismic activity. She rigged sensors to detect incoming tremors and potential threats. Zaraka seemed to understand these efforts, her eyes tracking Erin's movements with cautious respect. The cubs began to mirror their mother's hunting instincts. Erin observed as one pup stalked a small rodent-like creature, muscles tensed, then pounced with surprising precision. Their survival depended on mastering the planet's unforgiving laws. The line between predator and prey was thin, and each day was a lesson in balance. Erin's own skills adapted in tandem. She learned to move silently, to read the environment like the wolves did. She mimicked Zaraka's low growls and body language to calm the cubs during storms. This human, once an outsider, a stranger to Velkaron's brutal rhythms, was becoming part of the ecosystem. Yet the physical demands weighed heavily. Erin's injuries flared under the constant strain. Sleep was elusive. Her rations dwindled. Still, the human spirit, fueled by determination and the bond forged with Zaraka and her cubs, pushed her forward. Communication evolved beyond gestures and sounds. Erin began recording vocalizations, noting patterns that correlated with specific actions or warnings. The cubs responded to her humming with subtle variations, and Zaraka's growls shifted tone depending on context. Erin hypothesized a primitive syntax emerging, an unprecedented breakthrough in cross-species interaction. But it wasn't just science. It was survival intertwined with empathy. Erin's journals reflected this transformation. Logic demands efficiency. But life demands connection. We survive because we care. Because we refuse to be alone. Time blurred into a rhythm of work and vigilance. Erin engineered water condensers from damaged units, collecting moisture from the rare fog that rolled in at dawn. She rigged a power circuit to charge a communication beacon, hoping to signal any passing Dominion patrols. The reality was grim. Rescue was unlikely. They were on their own. The cubs thrived under Zaraka's watchful eye and Erin's nurturing. Their hunting skills improved. They began responding to Erin's commands, a sign that trust and training were bridging the species divide. Erin felt a swell of hope she hadn't dared to entertain before. Yet the planet's unrest was relentless. A massive quake tore through the region one evening, shaking the shelter violently. Debris rained down, knocking out power and damaging their improvised defenses. Erin and Zaraka worked quickly to secure the cubs, moving them to a safer alcove. That night, Erin reflected on the fragility of their existence. They were an unlikely family, human and alien, predator and protector, bound by necessity and choice. In the face of abandonment, they had created a sanctuary where none should have existed. Erin's resolve hardened. She vowed that whatever it took, they would survive. Not just as specimens, not just as survivors, but as proof that compassion could defy even the coldest logic. The planet might be dying, but their story was just beginning. The days stretched into weeks, yet rescue did not come. The Dominion's cold silence was a constant reminder that Erin and her unlikely family were truly abandoned. But surrender was never an option. The bond between her and Zaraka, and between Zaraka and her cubs, had transformed survival into purpose. This was no longer about escaping Velkaron 5. It was about redefining what it meant to be alive. The cubs had grown significantly, their strength and coordination sharpening with each passing day. They moved with fluid grace, their bioluminescent fur now glowing softly even in the daylight. Erin noted how their behavior evolved beyond mere instinct. There was playfulness, curiosity, and moments of caution that spoke to a developing awareness. Zaraka, once wounded and fragile, had regained much of her strength. Her vigilance never wavered. She patrolled their territory methodically, always alert to the planet's shifting dangers. Erin respected her fiercely, not just as a protector, but as a leader. Their roles had crystallized. Erin provided care and strategy, Zaraka provided instinct and strength, and the cubs embodied hope and continuity. Despite their progress, the environment remained hostile. The seismic activity intensified unpredictably. Erin's sensors picked up tremors that threatened to collapse even their fortified shelter. Each event forced quick decisions. Should they flee, rebuild, or hide? The unpredictability tested their resilience and forced a growing interdependence. Erin pushed herself to the limit, rationing supplies with increasing precision, improvising water collection systems, and hunting with Zaraka and her cubs to supplement their diet. She learned to read the planet's subtle signs, changes in wind patterns, shifts in soil vibrations, animal behavior, to anticipate danger. One morning, Erin noticed a strange signal on her salvaged comm unit, a faint, encrypted Dominion frequency attempting to establish contact. Heart pounding, she responded cautiously, maintaining strict operational silence about her exact location. The message was cryptic but clear. A scheduled retrieval mission was set for 2 cycles later. The Dominion intended to retrieve all surviving specimens. Relief washed over her, tempered by skepticism. Would they accept her findings? Would they recognize the value of the living bond they'd formed? Or would they see only data, and order another abandonment? Erin knew that survival meant more than waiting, it meant preparing. She spent the next days fortifying their shelter, training the cubs to respond swiftly to alarms, and preparing for rapid extraction. The wolves adapted, their instincts honed by Erin's guidance. Together, they practiced moves and signals that transcended words, creating a silent code born from necessity. Zoraka's trust in Erin was unwavering. The mother wolf no longer saw her as an alien presence but as an indispensable ally. Erin, in turn, had grown attuned to the wolves' emotions: fear, aggression, curiosity, and even affection. This mutual understanding was a rare gift, the product of survival and shared struggle. The retrieval day arrived amid a violent storm. Erin monitored the landing zone from a concealed vantage point as a Dominion shuttle pierced the turbulent sky. Her heart hammered with anticipation and caution. The shuttle touched down briefly, sending a squad to the coordinates. Zoraka and the cubs retreated to the safety of the shelter, while Erin approached the squad alone. She carried no weapons, only the data logs, her medkits, and the story of their survival. The Dominion officers were skeptical at first. Their trained eyes searched for signs of deception or failure. Erin spoke calmly but firmly, recounting the events, the behavioral evidence, and the undeniable intelligence of Zoraka and her offspring. The commanding officer scanned the cubs through a portable scanner, registering their vitals and unique biological markers. There was silence, a pause heavy with reconsideration. The cubs, once written off as non-essential, were now living proof of an unexpected evolutionary leap. Orders came down swiftly. The squad was to assist in stabilizing the shelter and securing the cubs for transport. Erin was granted limited authority to oversee their care during transit. The Dominion's cold policies had faltered in the face of undeniable life. As the shuttle lifted off, Erin looked back at Velcaron 5, the dying planet that had tested them all. She thought of the choice she had made: to defy protocol, to risk everything for creatures others deemed worthless. That choice had sparked a chain reaction, challenging assumptions, igniting empathy, and forcing a system built on logic to reconsider its values. In the weeks that followed, the cubs were transported to a secure Dominion facility. Their development was monitored closely. Erin remained their guardian, advocate, and chronicler. Her reports catalyzed new debates about sentience, compassion, and the definition of worth. The Dominion began revising protocols, influenced by the undeniable lesson that intelligence and loyalty could emerge in unexpected forms, and that humanity's instinct to protect life was a powerful force. Erin's story, once dismissed as irrational defiance, became a symbol of hope, that even in the vast cold of space, the flame of compassion could burn fiercely enough to change destinies. The legacy of Zoraka and her cubs endured, not as abandoned relics of a dying world, but as pioneers of a future where empathy and survival coexisted, and where humanity's capacity to choose mercy proved that sometimes, the greatest strength lay not in domination, but in connection.